Shenendehowa Central School District, the Clifton Park Half Moon Public Library, and the Alcohol and Substance Abuse Prevention Council to bring you tonight's program. I'd like to thank Rebecca Carmen, Kelly DeFisciani, and Dr. Oliver Robinson from Shenendehowa Central School District. Also, Luann Stewart and Ann Koga from the Clifton Park Half Moon Public Library, and James Norton from the Prevention Council for coming together with Captain to bring this presentation to you. Special thanks to our speakers, Megan, Rodney, Linda, and Sergeant Douglas Paquette from the New York State Police. And also, we thank the community agencies who have joined us tonight. St. Peter's Hospital Addiction Recovery Center, Whitney M. Young Jr. Health Center, Recovery Advocacy of Saratoga, Nara Family Groups, Clifton Park Half Moon Emergency Corps, Saratoga County Youth Bureau, Saratoga County Drug Treatment Court, and the Shenendehowa SAD Club. Please feel free to visit their tables in the lobby after our program. We would also like to acknowledge Congressman Paul Tonko. He sits on the Addiction Treatment Recovery Caucus, and while he is unable to be here tonight with us, as he is currently in Washington, his office did contact us to offer an opportunity to continue this conversation with the Congressman directly. We thank you all for taking the time to join us as we shine a light on a national epidemic and an ever-growing problem that has impacted our own community, as you will learn about tonight. Our hope is to promote awareness and ultimately prevention through community education and collaboration. Tonight, we hope that as you listen to these powerful personal stories of addiction, tragedy, recovery, strength, and healing, and we have an opportunity to come together as a community on all fronts, youth and families, educators, lawmakers, law enforcement, emergency response services, recovery, support, and healing services, together, we can bring about positive change and make a difference. Before we begin, please join me in welcoming Dr. Oliver Robinson, Superintendent at Shenendehowa Central School District.
Thank you very much, Michelle. So, why are we here? And you probably say, well, we all know why we're here. And I just want to put some perspective from my lens as superintendent. I see this as the community coming together to deal with a growing epidemic. As superintendent, I get to see the good, the bad, and the ugly within our communities. And probably one of the most heart-wrenching things that I do is when I attend funerals of students. And I see it firsthand. I know there are parents in here who are dealing with firsthand the impact of addiction. I see the impact of heroin on our kids when I go to funeral services and knowing that, my God, what could we have done differently to make a difference in the life of that child, for that family. So that's why we're here. I want to put in that perspective because oftentimes we go to events and we all walk out feeling good about ourselves because we attended. This is more than an event that we attend. I hope that all the people who are here will leave here with a commitment to say, what can I do? What can I personally do to make a difference so that the addiction of heroin and the deaths from it will no longer be something that plague our community and plague our young people. And so that's why we're here. And I applaud the efforts of the library. I applaud the effort of Captain. I applaud the efforts of the Prevention Council to say, you know what, let's come together. Let's come together and hopefully our combined voices will make a difference in this community, what we call, for me, the Shen community. Because we have wonderful young people, and the young people who are here who will be certainly displaying their level of maturity tonight by being the spokesperson on a topic that's so gut-wrenching. One that we often don't want to talk about because we always think it's someone else's problem. But it's all of our problems. I have kids of my own, and every day I fear, what will that be? What will that next day, that next moment be? So that's why we're here, and that's why this conversation is so important. But more important, it's not the conversation, it's what we do from here. It's what we lobby for, it's what we advocate. And certainly Congressman Tonko is a tremendous friend of mine personally. And he's one that we have had this conversation. I've had a conversation with Jim Tedesco at the state level. We must do something so that this no longer continue to be a threat to our young people, no longer destroy families. So that's why we're here. And I trust that the people who decide to come out on a rainy night, not only leave here, but go and tell someone else that we can make a difference. We are the people who can make a difference because the future of our young people is absolutely too important for for us to sit idly by and hope that someone else would do it. So I applaud all of you who are here tonight. I applaud you because you're not here for show or fashion. You're here out of concern, you're here out of caring, or you're here because you've been directly impacted by this epidemic. So hopefully after tonight, we'll continue to grow as a community and address this issue. So hopefully that we'll never ever again have to have the unfortunate reality of seeing a young life snatched away too early. So again, to all those who organized, to all those who will be participating on the panel, I say thank you, because it's an important conversation that will lend to important actions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson. Tonight's program will be facilitated by CAPteens. CAPteens is a community-based youth leadership program comprised of over 100 Shenendehowa High School students. CAPteens are shining stars in our school and community, and they serve as youth ambassadors for Captain Youth and Family Services, our nonprofit agency that has served the community for over 35 years. The CAPteens program is committed to youth leadership development, community service and volunteerism, and personal and social growth opportunities, focusing on character education and development. Our mission is be the change you wish to see in the world. Like Captain itself, CAPteens is a volunteer-driven provider of hope, a community of help, with a focus on uplifting and empowering youth and families in our community. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to our CAPteen hosts.
Hello, and good evening, everyone. My name is Erez Maiman, and I'm a junior at Shenendehowa High School.
My name is Joe McKinnon, and I'm a senior at Shenendehowa High School.
My name is Holly Swim, and I'm a junior at Shenendehowa High School.
And my name is Kim O'Reilly, and I'm a senior at Shenendehowa High School.
First off, before we begin, we would like to thank our speakers, Megan, Rodney, Linda, and Sergeant Douglas Paquette from the New York State Police for their time and dedication towards this program. On top of that, we'd like to thank Hannaford for the food and refreshments they have provided for us, located in the lobby. And I would also like to thank Karen Hagan, the District Attorney of Saratoga County, for being here with us tonight, and any other community leaders present. I apologize if we have missed any names, and from here, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us.
Tonight, you will be hearing about how individuals in our community have been affected by the heroin crisis. In addition to that, you will be hearing from Technical Sergeant Douglas Paquette of the New York State Police.
Towards the end of our program, we will be having an open question and answer section. We invite everyone here to ask a question of our speakers and to join us in the community conversation. On your way in, we hope you sign our guest book so we can notify you of any upcoming Real Talk events.
On the back of your pamphlet, you will find a short 10-question pretest. We invite you to fill this out now to assess your current knowledge of heroin. On the way out, you will find the answers to those pretests posted in the lobby. We hope that by the end of our program, you all, as parents, students, and concerned citizens, will walk away with a greater sense of awareness.
Heroin is derived from morphine, which comes from the Asian opium poppy plant. Often found in white and brown powder, heroin can be snorted, smoked, or injected, allowing for fast access to the brain, which gives it its addictive properties.
According to a July 2015 CDC release, heroin use has increased across the U.S. among men, women, most age groups, and all income levels.
According to a 2015 Times Union article, in the past decade from 2004 to 2013, admissions for heroin and prescription opioid abuse treatment increased 136% statewide. The largest increases were in the 18 to 24 age group and the geographic regions of upstate and Long Island.
According to the Prevention Council in Saratoga County, from 2012 to 2014, the overdose death rate has tripled.
We would like to welcome our first guest, Technical Sergeant Douglas Paquette from the New York State Police. He has been a member of the New York State Police since 1986. He is currently the chairman of the New York State Governor's Advisory Council on underage drinking and drug use, and is also in charge of drug and alcohol training and enforcement programs, as well as underage drinking enforcement efforts for the New York State Police. Our interviewer is Brendan Peichel, a senior at Shenendehowa High School. Join me in welcoming them.
Thank you, Suarez. Hello, Doug.
Evening.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what heroin is and why it's become so popular today?
Well, you folks touched on it initially. It's a derivative of opium. It's a processed form of opium. The history of it, back in the 1880s is when heroin was first developed, and the company Bayer was actually involved in the manufacture, the design, and development of it. And really all the chemists did was they took a molecule of morphine and glued it to another molecule of morphine, not glued per se, but with a chemical bond. And that's what heroin is. So that's kind of where it came from. And the second part of your question is, why is it so popular? It's kind of an offshoot from the prescription pain pill world. And when you can't get your pain pills anymore, either through script or stealing or bartering for them, well, that's the next thing they move on to.
Thank you. So why is heroin so available for kids? How do they get it? And what age should most people start using heroin?
And most people don't go, hey, tonight I'm going to shoot up some heroin. I'm going to snort some heroin and see what happens. It usually doesn't go that way. Usually, again, as I said, it's an offshoot. They've had an injury. There's been a broken bone or a sports injury or a car crash or something where they were prescribed pain pills. And they like that feeling associated with it. And maybe they re-injure themselves, or they're able to get more pain pills. And and then when they can't, then they move on. Now, the folks that are producing the heroin, this time around, and remember this too, folks, these drugs just don't go away. They go out of vogue for a while, and then they come back around. If you think about it, all right, we had if those of you in the room remember the 60s, right? There was a heroin issue in the 60s. There was another heroin issue in the early 90s. Well, we're having another heroin issue. It didn't go away, it just cycled. And this time around, this stuff is a lot more pure, a lot less cut in it than it was. So that's pushed up the addiction potential of it because it is so much stronger.
Thank you. We've been told that the face of heroin abusers looks different today because across all groups, it could be any person, any race, age or race. It could be a high school student, or it could be a mother. How can you tell if someone's actively abusing heroin?
The eyes. I put up some photos on the side over there, and the idea behind those was to get you guys to look at them before we started, maybe look at them at the end of the night. And often they say, well, how do you tell? How do you look at it? Well, it's the eyes. Because the drugs that are out there, they all affect the eyes in some way. And in heroin's case, it's part of the category that we would call narcotic analgesics. And it's heroin, it's morphine, it's your Vicodins, it's fentanyls, Demerol, methadone. They all fall into the narcotic analgesic category. And they all do one specific thing to the eyes, and that is constrict the pupils. So when I walk up to somebody and I'm talking to them, the first thing I'm doing is looking at your eyes. And I'm saying, what do they look like? Are they big? I mean, where I don't hardly see the iris at all? Or is there kind of a normal ratio between the pupil and the iris? Or like, wow, you can barely see that pupil. All I see is the iris around. And since we know that the only category that's causing the constriction, that's the first thing right off the bat. And then we could talk about, if you want to talk about track marks or somebody's injecting, well, maybe they're not injecting. Well, we can talk about droopy eyelids, that's another one. They're kind of on the nod, where they kind of sit, kind of slouch down and kind of relax and think they're asleep. And they're not, they're just very relaxed. So there's a whole series of things like that, but it all starts off with the eyes. And so many times, just that first, hey, how you doing today? And you're looking at them, and you run with it from there.
Wow. Heroin has become more prominent in our community today. How much of an increase have you seen recently?
Considerable. I mean, I don't have the actual specific stats as we increased it by 10% or 15%, but we do know that this is a corridor. We know that this stuff runs up through the Capital District. It runs over through Vermont, comes back and forth. We are making an impact because a lot of the folks that are transporting are saying, hey, if we're on the interstate, there's a greater chance of us getting caught. Let's move over to the secondary roads. And so Route 22 runs along the side. So they're going to routes like that, Route 9, Route 22, Route 12 running up through the Utica area. Those smaller roads may not seem the same kind of patrol that we would with our dedicated interstate efforts. So they're getting smarter too, so they're making it more difficult for us to find.
Wow. Some people believe it only takes one time to get addicted. Is that true? Can you tell us more about that?
It may or it may not. It kind of depends on your brain chemistry. There are certain people that are more predisposed to having an effect of that particular substance. Some may be more predisposed to be affected by a stimulant, like a cocaine or methamphetamine. Others more of a narcotic, and heroin being one of those. But the fact that this batch that's around out there now is so much stronger than we've seen in the last go-around really increases the chances of that. Because the minute your brain chemistry is all, it's unaffected, it's smooth, it's polished. And the minute you start to put chemicals in there, regardless whether you're taking meth or coke or heroin or weed or whatever that drug is, you're changing your brain chemistry. And how much and how often you do that to it will then kind of set you up to see how much your body, because eventually your body's going, you know what, I'm going to stop making those neurotransmitters that I normally do because the drug is going to take its place. And then you're now physically hooked on the drug and you're eating it just to feel normal.
So you're talking about brain chemistry and how other drugs, when you take other drugs, it affects you differently. How often do you find heroin laced with other drugs and toxins?
Well, you're not buying pure heroin. You're buying heroin laced with something else. They're cutting it with other items. You know, they're cutting it with the powdered milk, baby laxative, powdered sugar, a whole pile of stuff like that because they can make it go further. But then we have the folks that are cutting it with fentanyl, and we know that fentanyl is 100 times stronger than morphine, and we know that the fentanyl, so you're shooting a hot shot of that, and we find they're dying with the needle in their arm. We just had a case not too long ago where it took, we had our case, our Narcan kid, and the medics used 7 before they got him back. So that's a total of 8 shots in Narcan to bring this person back. And the kicker is, one of my guys who works for me had one where they did the guy, took him to the hospital, went to the hospital, he was released, he got back 4 hours later, they're back at the house again. He used the second batch of the other troopers Narcan, and they told him this time, like, we're dry, okay? And by the time the medics get here, because they're really rural Catskill area of down Catskill Mountain area, you'll be dead because we can't get you back here with the medicine to cover for you. So that's what we're dealing with. And they wake up, when you hit them with a Narcan, they wake up fighting because you just destroyed their high. They don't understand how close they were to dying. The medics are smiling because they've been there. They wake up, they're combative because you just ruined their $80 bag or whatever it happened to be that they had. So again, you got to consider that.
Wow. How can you help a loved one who's addicted to heroin? We know the term tough love as in like cutting people off, but is that the best way to handle their situation?
Getting them into treatment is the best way to do it. And for the folks here who are going to talk on that topic later on, so many of these community meetings that I've done over the last 2 years, the folks, many of the recovering addicts have been through treatment 4, 5, 6. I was in Catskill, one young man his 12th time through treatment. So again, it comes down to how much they were doing, how long they were doing it. But the bottom line is that it's going to take perseverance and it's going to take tenacity and patience to just get them into the treatment, get them working, and realize that the odds of them relapsing are pretty high. And eventually, and maybe you can't get them into treatment because they haven't hit bottom yet. And I'm sure the folks are going to talk about that too. And until they get to the bottom, you can try and push all you want, but it's just not going to work.
So this room is full of parents and students. If there's one thing you want them to remember as you finish here today, what would that be?
Well, to the parents in the room, pay attention to detail with your kids. Take time, sit down, talk to them, make it a conversation. Don't make it a lecture. And look at their eyes, watch their mannerisms. Look for changes in friends, acquaintances, mannerisms, things they do, their grades are sliding, things like that. Those are telltale clues. They're not happening for no reason at all. But look and ask those questions. And be aware that you may find out stuff that you don't want to know about, but it's better to find out this way than somewhere else down the road. So just talk to them. Just stay on top and talk to them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sergeant Paquette and Brenton. As we share some facts with you, we welcome to the stage our next guest, Linda, a parent who lost her son to a heroin overdose. Tonight, she shares her story from a parent's perspective in the hopes of educating parents and teens to the dangers of this horrible drug.
According to the DEA, upwards of 5,000 kilograms of heroin were seized in 2014. National Drug Take-Back Day is a free and anonymous program that allows law enforcement to take back unused over-the-counter and prescription drugs safely. According to the Prevention Council, the last Take-Back Day, 212 pounds of medications were turned in to the Clifton Park locations. This helped the I-87 corridor reach 7,000 pounds of turned in medication. The next take-back day is April 30th.
Please welcome to the stage our next guest, Linda. Our interviewer is CAPteen Emily Matura, a senior at Shenendehowa High School. Join me in welcoming them.
Hi, Linda. Thank you for joining us today. Can you tell us a little about what brings you here today and what your message is?
Yes, first I'd like to say that, I'd like to say that because this is all still very fresh to me, it's difficult to talk about, and so I will probably be reading most of my responses. My son died of an overdose, something completely shocking since there were no indications of his using drugs other than drinking. The cause of death was not the heroin, but rather the fentanyl that it was laced with, of which he had no idea. This devastated our family and changed our lives forever. If I can help prevent just one person from going down this path, it will help us to know that. I'd like to make a plea to all kids in the audience to just think about the consequences of your actions. To the parents to never say, not my child. And to educators to become more aggressive in their warnings and counseling.
Can you tell us about what happened to your son?
My son was a senior in college and classes had just ended. He was with friends, drinking and toasting a student that had passed away 2 weeks earlier, and he was feeling very down. I tried to contact him all day and didn't hear from him until later that evening, when he texted me and said he was fine and would talk to me in the morning. But that call never came. Instead, we were awoken by 2 state troopers at our door to tell us he had passed away.
Can you tell us a little about your son?
He had his best year academically that last year. A nice girlfriend that never saw him doing any drugs, and he seemed to be maturing. He was the gentlest person, so thoughtful and very generous, almost to a fault. He had many friends and was respected and loved by everyone. We couldn't have had a better son.
Looking back, is there anything you see that could have been a gateway for what happened?
Looking back and saying what if all the time. During his junior year of high school, he was prescribed Adderall, which was the only drug that we knew of, and we hopefully that didn't contribute in any way. But he, as many teens, was also prescribed medications when his wisdom teeth were removed, and later on for surgery from a sports injury. These are common situations that many of our youth are receiving these potent medications for. There were also several drinking instances and a marijuana instance he was involved in. These were things that many of us assume were normal experimentations for teens, a rite of passage that would be corrected with maturity. Now we know that these are both gateway drugs, especially dangerous to those that may have a genetic predisposition to someone with any type of substance abuse. Sometimes kids who are quieter tend to avoid conflicts. When he was younger, he always seemed to go along with whatever his friends wanted. Then in high school, he became the life of the party, I'm told, probably from drinking, which made him more social.
Is there anything you'd like to tell the parents in the audience?
When my son was alive and returned from another kid's wake, my husband said to him, "I hope I don't have to worry about you." And he replied, "Dad, I'm not that stupid. Don't ever think it can't be my kid." Kids, especially under peer pressure and with the influence of drinking, don't have the capacity to think clearly. Many think they're invincible. I was unaware until several months earlier that heroin had even made a resurgence, and certainly not in our community. Do I think my son was an addict? No. But I do know he was super trusting and trusted a fellow student and made a very stupid decision, one with a consequence he never saw coming. Now, I have a firm belief that there is a link between alcohol and marijuana as gateway drugs. They can lead to other drugs. Not always, but certainly a possibility.
What do you want to tell the teens in the audience?
Take things seriously when it comes to choices you'll make regarding drinking and drugs, any type of drugs. Think about the short and long-term consequences. The student who gave this drug to my son is now in jail for 5 years. His future is now changed forever also. There seems to be a lot of sharing. Even with sharing, think about what's in it. Could it kill the other person? Heroin and any drug can be laced with other more potent drugs, as the sergeant said. You may not realize it until it's too late. Fentanyl-laced heroin is becoming more of a problem than the heroin itself because it is so much more powerful than heroin.
Can you tell us about how this has affected your family?
I'm sure you can only imagine. Holidays and birthdays are pretty depressing. We just try to go through the motions and look forward to the holidays being over. The family's all been through therapy to help deal with this tragedy.
What can we do differently as a community?
There certainly isn't enough education. Education needs to start in middle school and continue through high school. Preparing our youth for all the temptations facing them in college and how to deal with peer pressure. They need to know what drugs are out there and in what form. These are all too readily available to our kids. And when their senses are weakened by alcohol, reasonable thinking diminishes and disappears. Our schools need to use scare tactics, I feel, that show the reality through visuals, that show the reality of the problem. What people look like when they're addicted to heroin or other drugs, including alcohol. Show a person being resuscitated from a drug overdose. Don't just talk about it, show them so they can really feel what it's like. What happened to the DARE program? I have to ask. We spend all kinds of money on sports and other fluff, but what about protecting our children?
How do you feel you are coping with this, and how are you getting through this?
I don't know what I'd do without my faith. My faith and some great friends and family, and my own family. I know my son is still with me, but I'll never be able to wrap my arms around him again or see his smiling face except in my thoughts. I've also reached out to other parents who are living with this epidemic every day through their kids. And I hope by telling my story, which is very fresh, I can awaken even one person, parent or teen, to the dangers around them.
Thank you so much for being here and sharing your story.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you so much, Linda, for sharing your powerful story.
According to a November 2015 article from Business Insider, drug overdoses are the leading cause of injury deaths in the U.S. The DEA's annual report recognizes that overdose deaths, particularly from prescription drugs and heroin, have reached epidemic levels. According to the Prevention Council, 9 out of 10 active substance users started using substances before age 18.
Please welcome our next guest, Rodney. Our interviewer is CAPteen Alec Herbert, a junior at Shenendehowa High School. Join me in welcoming them.
First of all, I want to thank you again for speaking tonight, Rodney. Do you want to start by telling us a little bit about your experience with heroin addiction?
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for showing up today and making me extra nervous. Definitely not a professional, but I can tell you a little bit about my story. First of all, I'd like to emphasize the fact that I was just like you guys. I'm just like you guys now. Normal person, you know. Wasn't a junkie or anything right off the rip. I grew up, you know, in a stable home with lots of love. I excelled in sports and academics. I moved around a little bit, ended up going to some different schools and stuff throughout growing up, and you know, I had to make some new friends here and there. But you know, all in all, it was a pretty normal childhood. I guess probably by the time I was a teenager, though, I you know, experimented with marijuana and alcohol, and you know, the social aspect of it brought me, you know, connected me with a bunch of people and stuff, and being a new kid in school, it helped make me sociable, I guess. So I made it through high school, excellent grades and everything, and I ended up having a complete scholarship, full ride to college. So I went to Clarkson University for computer programming, and there is where I really started falling off the deep end. There was a lot of kids there, no parental supervision, nobody forcing you to go to class, and there was a lot more stuff readily available there. A lot of kids with disposable incomes, and you know, that's when I started really experimenting with stuff, and by the time I finished a year, I was failed out. I think I had a 0.7 GPA, so that wasn't my thing. I left college and had to go into the workforce, and at that point I was, you know, pretty much a daily user at that point. I didn't get into an accident or anything like that. I started out, you know, taking some hydrocodones or some lesser form of pain pill. And what that did for me was it allowed me to be okay with myself, just sit by myself. You know, I always needed to be like at a party or in a group of people, but then when I found opiates, I could just sit by myself and sit in a room, not doing anything, and be okay. So, you know, I really fell in love with it, with the feeling, and fell right in love with it. I couldn't support my habit as my habit grew. I couldn't work enough or get paid enough to support my habit. So, you know, then I turned to street pharmacy. And which led me to some really awful places. That, you know, a middle-class American from a good family shouldn't end up, you know, in back alleys and city streets, or having guns pulled on them, or different stuff like that. But, you know, it happened, and I watched, you know, friends overdose and die. I saw a lot of horrible things, and but it had me. The drug just had me, and you know, to a point where I would have did anything. You know, I was raised to be a good kid and an honest kid and a hard worker, and slowly, the more the addiction crept in, it just, my morals started to slip away. You know, I started lying and you know, stealing and cheating and doing whatever it took. I don't know as if you know, any threats would have stopped me either. You know, the threat of going to jail or prison almost would have been inviting, you know? I got to a point where I just, you know, I didn't know what else to do. I almost wanted to die, but I didn't want to kill myself. Eventually I got to a point where I woke up 10 years later and I hadn't done anything with my life. I existed for 10 years. I ran into someone I went to college with who had told me all about everything that they had done since graduating school and been all over the country and did all these things. And then they, you know, asked me what I had done. I said, I got high every day for 10 years. I've done nothing. I've gone nowhere. You know, I've just dug a giant hole. And that was sort of like a wake-up call for me. And then, you know, I ended up getting help.
So we obviously have a lot of families here tonight. Can you tell us about how your heroin addiction affected your relationship with your friends and family?
Absolutely. You know, at first, with the, you know, friends and family, I was able to sort of balance it and sort of, you know, use and keep my friends and family and kind of keep it all together and have everything look all right on the surface. But eventually, you know, people don't want to hang out with a drug addict, you know, and I didn't have the motivation either to do all the things that I used to do too, you know. The friends were like, hey, let's go shoot some hoops, you know. It's like, nah, I think I'm gonna stay home, you know. And so the friends sort of started to fizzle away first. And then the family started to sort of fizzle away too. The extended family, you know, they didn't wanna, you know, invite me to the different functions and whatnot because I'd have the droopy eyes and be passed out, or, you know, I'd be having a conversation with someone and, you know, doze off in the middle of a sentence and then come back to. So I sort of, you know, distanced myself from the family, and eventually my own mother threw me out of the house, and then I had, you know, no one, and it was rough.
So what was the most important factor in your recovery that helped you sort of rebuild your life and those connections that you had beforehand?
I think that when I started with the recovery process, it had been so long since I was truly, you know, without drugs that I didn't know who I was, and I really had to take a lot of time and reflect and find out, you know, what do I like to do? What am I interested in? You know, who am I? And find out what in life I'm passionate about. You know, and it took a little while. It took a while of just surrounding myself with people that didn't do drugs, just to not do drugs. And eventually, then I had to start looking at, well, what do I want to do besides not do drugs? And you know, people are passionate about a lot of different things. You know, for me, I found a love for nature. I got into hiking and backpacking. I became an Adirondack 46er, hiking all the high peaks in the Adirondacks. I've hiked all through New England, New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine. You know, and that's just something I'm passionate about.
So you feel that it's most important to find something else that you're passionate about? And were there any programs that helped you out towards the end of your addiction to recover from that?
As far as finding something you're passionate about, I think that's extremely important. I think it's important to make connections too. You know, I started using drugs because I wanted to make a connection, and I was able to get off from drugs and stay clean from drugs by making connections to people and things around me. So I have to like limit myself from my Facebook usage, because that's not making a connection, you know? Could you repeat the programs?
Yeah.
All right, like the sergeant talked about, I think I never counted them all, but I went through some, my fair share of detoxes and rehabs and that sort of thing. You know, I just wasn't ready. He talked about a rock bottom. I don't know as if I hit a rock bottom, because you can always get lower until you die. So I'm not dead, so I guess I didn't hit bottom, but eventually, you know, I got to a point where, you know, I wanted it, and I had to really fight for it. It was at a time when insurance companies didn't want to pay for, you know, an opiate addict to get help, because they considered it non-life threatening, because technically you can't die from the withdrawals. So it really, I really had to fight for myself just to get the help that I needed. That's about it.
So we're almost out of time here for our interview. Is there anything else you'd like to tell the audience before we finish?
I guess I'd really like to, you know, talk about the fact that, you know, people do recover, and they're not bad people. And there's a stigma, you know, along with being an addict. And, you know, I just would like people to, you know, maybe open their eyes a little bit and extend a little bit of love instead of you know, looking down upon the people. And because I think with a little bit of love, anybody can recover.
All right, well, thank you very much again, Rodney.
Thank you, Alec and Rodney. Almost 50% of young heroin users said that they first got addicted on opioid pain medication. In 2012, 259 million prescriptions were written for opioids, which is more than enough to give every American adult their own bottle of pills.
According to the CDC, people addicted to alcohol are twice as likely to be heroin users. People addicted to marijuana are 3 times as likely. Cocaine users are 15 times as likely. And prescription opioid users are 40 times as likely to be heroin users. According to the Alcohol and Substance Abuse Prevention Council, nationally, 22 million individuals live in long-term sustained recovery from heroin addiction. 78% of these recovering addicts have furthered their education after recovery. 28% have started their own business after recovery. 87% vote, and 84% volunteer in the community. Please welcome our next guest, Megan. Our interviewer is CAPteen Sydney Potter, a senior at Shenendehowa High School. Join me in welcoming them.
First off, I want to say thank you so much for being here and for your time. So please tell us, what brings you here tonight?
Well, I want to say thank you so much for having me. Honestly, I can say that I never thought that I would be here. If you had asked me years ago when I was a kid, I would have told you I was going to be the first female president of the United States and I would be running the country right now. If you had ever suggested that I would be sitting on a stage as a self-admitted recovering heroin addict trying to educate people in the community about addiction, I would have told you that you were crazy.
So how did it all start?
Well, for me, I started experimenting with drugs and alcohol when I was in the 7th grade, which was ironically the same year that my father had passed away from liver cancer, which was directly connected to the fact that he was an alcoholic, although at the time I wasn't able to put the pieces together. All that I knew was that it was a devastating loss for me. And I also was the type of person who desperately needed to fit in. So I would make a lot of choices in my life that I didn't necessarily agree with or that I wasn't 100% behind just because that's what other people were doing. You know, which is unfortunate, but I think that that's kind of how it is for a lot of people. I was you know, kind of like what Rodney said, I was raised in a terrific household. I came from a good background. I was an excelling straight A student who never missed a day of school. I was active in sports and I participated in extracurricular activities. I was in Odyssey of the Mind and, you know, had all kinds of friends and everything else. You know, if you ever asked my parents if they thought that I was gonna end up here tonight, they would have probably had no idea. They would have never expected that. You know, and although it was just experimenting with drugs and alcohol, opiates were not a part of my story. That was really nothing that was around when I was in school, when I was growing up. It was marijuana, drinking, there was cocaine and things like that. So for me, it wasn't until a traumatic car accident that I was involved with shortly after the beginning of my senior year that opiates kind of came into my life. You know, I was in the accident. Friends and I were driving home from Virginia Beach and somebody fell asleep at the wheel and the vehicle flipped 6 times. And I remember waking up and there was all kinds of smoke and I was absolutely terrified. I remember thinking to myself that the vehicle was on fire. And I was like, oh my God, the car is gonna blow up. I have to get out of here. And then I woke up in the hospital and they told me that I had fractured a vertebrae in my neck and in my back. You know, but all of that didn't really mean much to me. All that I remember is that it was a month before homecoming of my senior year and I was devastated that I wasn't gonna be able to go to that. You know, for somebody who always wanted to fit in and wanted to be the life of the party, I felt like my life was completely over. You know, I remember I had already like picked out my dress and my friends had to return it for me and I had to tell my date that I couldn't go and it was just, it was really, really devastating to go through that. You know, but at the end of the day when I was sent home, I had a fistful of prescription pain medication, of which me and my family knew nothing about. There was never a conversation with the doctor about any type of danger, of dependency, or anything like that. I just knew that when I took it, that it took my pain away. Not just my physical pain, but the mental pain that I was in as well. You know, so I just continued to find comfort in that. I didn't start off looking to become an addict. I was just looking to feel better. You know, I was unsuspecting of what was gonna happen in my life. And, you know, I found myself becoming dependent on them. And once you're in that cycle of being physically dependent on opiates, it's very, very difficult to get out of it. It's a desperation that unless you've gone through it, it's difficult to even describe the feeling of waking up and being that sick and knowing that nothing else is gonna make you feel better unless it's a substance outside of your body. You know, and that would take me to a path where I think a lot of pill addicts eventually end up, which is to the door of heroin because it's cheaper and it's more available. You know, again, like Rodney said, there was no amount of money that could fuel my habit. It didn't matter how hard I worked or who I knew or what I could do. It was never enough to get what I needed. You know, so I turned to that almost sort of as a solution because it was cheaper. You know, and it was the crowd of people. It was available to me, honestly, more available than pills were because people who get prescription pills, they want to keep their prescription pills because most of them are addicts, so they're difficult to find. So, you know, once I got wrapped up in that, it was just, you know, a black hole. It was a consuming black hole in my life that took me down a very, very dark path that I never could have imagined that I was going to end up. Luckily for me, I had divine intervention and I ended up getting arrested about 4 years ago. I've been sober for about 4 years now. And it truly saved my life and I was able to get involved with different programs that taught me, you know, how to live a sober life, which was very, very important.
So what is the overall message you'd like to leave with the audience tonight?
I would say that the most important thing is that people say to themselves, I mean, I know that I did this, I think a lot of people in the audience as well, is never say never. You know, people say to themselves, that's never gonna be me, that's never gonna be my kid. You know, that's never gonna be somebody that I know, that's not gonna happen in my community, you know, Shenendehowa or wherever it is that you're from. But it's not never, it's just not yet, and that's really the bottom line. There is no face to addiction. I mean, I had that, you know, when I was growing up, my idea of a heroin addict was like a bum living on the streets of New York City with a paper bag and like long scraggly hair who hadn't showered for weeks. It's what a lot of people think. But the bottom line, I'm a heroin addict. You know, there are heroin addicts that you would never imagine. So it's not never, it's not yet. You know, don't ever think to yourself that this couldn't be me, because it could. So I think that that's just really important for people to realize.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sydney and Megan. As our speakers, I'll take the stage. We are going to transition into our Q&A segment of the evening. Of course, on behalf of all of our speakers, we ask our audience to be mindful of our speakers' privacy and to be sensitive and respectful with your questions, given the nature of all their experiences. We'll now open it to questions, so. Yes, sir, in the blue.
Good evening. I'm a long-term health teacher in 5 different school districts. The longest tenure was at Shenendehowa. And I'd like to thank Officer Paquette for what he does. And Officer Paquette, you know, question I'm going to address to you. If you were running for president, you might be better than a lot of the candidates. What would you advise any of the candidates to stop this flow that we get coming up the Northway, the Thruway? And before you answer that, I just want to throw one other thing out. Love is an important word, 4-letter word. I've had a lot of kids over the years that have passed. And currently one right now, I got a call from California. It's fallen to the demons of the drug business. Fortunately, you know, I tried to get him connected with the former Shen grad who's out in California. His father's a lawyer in town. And I referred him to him, but it was a little bit too late. And the other thing I just want to say, and God bless your son. We talk about education as being an important issue here. I had a lot of kids that got hundreds on quizzes over the years. And as important as education is, love is more important in my opinion. And I haven't been convinced that education is the answer. So the question I want to ask you, what would you, and give me a little chance to think about it, what would you advise the candidates? And thank you very much for your service.
Thank you very much for the, okay, try again. Thank you very much for the question, I think. Probably wouldn't want me running for president because I'm probably a little too direct. If you don't like it, get over it, kind of thing. Doesn't always get you a lot of votes, but everybody knows where you stand. That said, what would I tell them? It is not any one particular thing. It's a pile of things. You heard, you know, a little bit about the treatment world, and in St. Rose last Thursday, I was doing something very similar to this, and we heard from a couple of the recovering addicts there that their trouble getting into treatment because of insurance issues and not being covered and things of that nature. So one of the first things is like, you know what, folks who need help, they need to get into recovery, they need that support, then you gotta get that available. You have to make that available, that's number one. Number two, it also comes back to the education, but not the strict book education that you talk about, the quizzes. It's the reality stuff where you're meeting with folks who are recovering addicts, and you know, you're meeting with somebody maybe who is at Green Haven or Sing Sing, who's there because they were out selling this crap, and this is, you know, they were an addict, they were selling it, and this is where they are. So that kind of reality-based is just as important. And then making folks aware what to look for, because again, the sooner you can identify it, the the sooner we have a better chance of getting into treatment and before it really starts to erode your brain chemistry. It has an effect, but if someone's been doing drugs for 10 years, they're gonna have a tougher time kicking because of their brain chemistry modifications than somebody who's been doing it for a year. Now, there's a lot of variables in there, and we're not gonna get into the science aspect of it, but you gotta know what to look for, and you gotta say, something's not right, I'm not sure what it is. Let's ask some more questions, let's look a little bit further. So it's really 3 different things that I feel all tied in together.
Sir in the white.
Yeah. Hi, my name's Jeffrey Flynn. I'm an emergency physician in Glens Falls Hospital. So I've kind of on the just behind the front lines of Officer Paquette with this problem. My question particularly to people who've been through the experience is what is the role of inpatient detox in terms of recovery? And I do have kind of an agenda with that, which is I have people in my family who had problems. They were under 18, had polysubstance abuse, and I was very just blown away to find out that in this area, the Capital District, there's no facilities that will take somebody under 18 years old who has a polysubstance addiction problem and no mental health history. I was shocked. Family member I had went to Connecticut for treatment. The good news was that major insurers do pay for it. So it's not a lack of insurance, it's a lack of facilities. But my question, particularly people who have been through the experience, I thought the greatest value was a 28-day detox program. Without that, I think the chances of most people recovering is very small. And that's, I'm talking particularly about kids in this district. 10%, and I have very reliable sources that are unofficial sources in the school that say 10% of the students in the upper classes at Shenendehowa High School either abuse or are addicted to oxycodone, hydrocodone, or Xanax. 10% either abusing or addicted. And that's an unofficial source, but it's a very, very close source. So that's the agenda I'm coming from. I have a very strong opinion. The only way we're going to deal with this epidemic is to develop an infrastructure. We have an illness, but with no facilities. How can you treat an illness without a hospital? If you have pneumonia, you don't have a hospital to put it in. We have hundreds of kids that are addicted or abusing drugs. We have no facilities to treat them. So it's a medical problem. It's not a moral problem. It's not being good or bad. It's a medical problem. But my particular question is am I biased or what is the role of inpatient detox in terms of recovering from heroin or other drugs? Is it that important? Is it the key or is it just part of it?
All right, I guess I'll answer. Is this working?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, inpatient definitely helped me. I think before I, completely directly answer your question, I'd like to just mention that unlike other drugs, I think that opiates and heroin specifically is a lonely drug. It's a lonely drug. People generally aren't using heroin and then going out to a party. People are sitting at home alone or with a couple people. It's not a big party drug. And the more you get into it, the more you separate yourself from society and become more and more alone. I don't have the exact statistics on it, but I've seen some statistics about the people that were in Vietnam. A lot of them got addicted to morphine and heroin. A huge percentage of the people that were in Vietnam did. And they came home from that war and they didn't go to rehab and they didn't go to detoxes because those things weren't even around. And they recovered because they came back to a loving family and made connections. They were completely isolated overseas under a lot of stress without being able to make connections. And when you can make connections to other people, you can recover. So to put me into a 28-day program with 100 other people that know what I've been through, that have gone through it themselves, and you can connect with them and try and recover, you know, it goes a long ways. I went through a 28-day program a long time ago, and I stayed on the right path for a couple, probably about a year and a half after that, and I you know, really started to build my life back together. But you know, I was just it just didn't come quick enough, and I started getting stressed and working all the time and not making those connections and not keeping those connections with family and friends and finding happiness. And I got stressed, and I went back to what I knew. That way that I was lonely, I was alone, and that drug made it bearable, you know. And I slid back into it, and I stayed on that path for a long time. Megan, what do you have to say?
I want to say that I think it's fantastic that you're so passionate about it. I think that we need people that are biased about this, because people need to talk about this, and you need to have opinions about it. I also think, like, in the recovery community, it's really simple. They talk about people, places, and things. So the bottom line is that 28-day facilities give people that are struggling, whether it's with heroin, with other types of addictions, the opportunity to get away from all of that, get out of the hamster wheel that is the life that you've created for yourself, and just be away from it all and focus on one thing solely, which is getting better and getting sober. There's no work, there's no family, there's no boyfriend, girlfriend, there's no none of that. You get to go for 28 days and just focus on that. So I mean, in my opinion, it's extremely important, and we do not have enough facilities. You know, the fact that people can raise their hand and say, I want to get sober, and the answer to them is basically, well, does your insurance cover it? Or we have a bed, but it'll be 3 weeks before it's available. That's crazy, because you know, the chances are that 3 weeks from now that same person that woke up and was sick enough and desperate enough to want to get the help that day isn't going to be sick enough and desperate enough 3 weeks from now. You know, and they might not even be alive to take the bed. So, I mean, I think it's incredibly important, and I agree with you 100%.
Yes, you in the blue sweater.
I'm a parent of a son in recovery. I'm a registered nurse, and we've been through a lot. And I'll tell you something about the insurances that I find pretty incredible through our journey. They call addiction a disease, but yet they don't treat it like one. If you have heart disease, you have cancer, you have diabetes, you don't have to fail to get into a 28-day program or even a detox for 4 or 5 days. But in order for that to happen, to get into a detox, you have to come pretty close to death, or to get into a 28-day program, you have to really do whatever you can. You have to fail. We were told that we had to fail at least 3 times to possibly qualify. So, needless to say, insurance never paid for anything.
You mean fail outpatient treatment?
Yes.
Hi, if I could just jump in for 1 second on that. I'm Dr. Michael Prezioso. I'm the Director of Community Services for Saratoga County, and also the Director of the County Mental Health Center. I can tell you that, without getting too far into the weeds, there are changes related to the requirements that the state's Office of Alcohol and Substance Abuse Services are going to be mandating insurance companies the need to fail a lesser level of care before someone's eligible for inpatient care. From what I understand, they're going to be modifying that so that's no longer going to be a condition. There will be an option to go directly into a 28-day inpatient.
How long before that takes effect? Yeah.
But I'm hearing that consistently, and I hear it more than one place, from more than one person, and more than one time. My confidence goes up a little bit.
In the back, right there in the glasses.
Hi, my name is Brittany. I'm also a recovering heroin addict, and I just wanted to know, like, for you guys or anybody else, me like going out of state to realize that like I could get clean. Yeah, I was with like over a month, but I couldn't get clean around here. Like, do you guys agree that like did it take you guys leaving state, or do you feel like do you have like a more like biased decision of like what you feel like worked better for you?
Yeah, I went to a jail cell, so typically when you go there, you don't really have much of an opportunity. They just tell you that you're gonna sit there and basically just feel like you're gonna die for as long as you are gonna feel that way. So I didn't, if I could, I would have loved to have gone out of state. But that wasn't my experience, and honestly, I'm very grateful for that, because that experience for me is what changed my entire way of thinking, because it goes back to the idea that I was never supposed to end up in jail. That was never gonna be me. And then I was there, going out of my mind, sick as a dog. I thought they were like trying to poison me with the blankets. There was smallpox. I thought they were trying to poison me with the food that they were giving me. Like, I was out of my mind. And they gave me Benadryl to help me sleep. So, yeah, that sucked really bad. That was just my experience, but that's great. Congratulations for you.
I think, whatever it takes. If you got to go out of state, go out of state. If I could have afforded to go out of state, I probably would have too. I did end up going into a longer term treatment. I went into a halfway house after the 28-day program. I actually had a job that I could have returned to and a place to stay after the 28-day program, but I didn't trust myself. I knew that I wouldn't make my first month's rent, that I'd go right back to it, that I needed a little bit longer out of society to, get things together. The only other thing I know is, even if I did go out of state, I still would have needed a longer term thing. This is just me, maybe originally when I had, only had a year or two of addiction, maybe I could have got away with 28 days, but after a decade, I bet you I could get heroin in any other state, so where there's a will, there's a way, and we're pretty resourceful. Drug addicts, we're pretty resourceful.
Yeah, this is the front.
Hello, everybody. My name is Idalia Sepulveda, and I'm a Shenendehowa High School PTSA president. My question is for my neighbor. Right now, she's dealing with her daughter, who's a heroin addict. She's going out of her mind. What do we tell her? She doesn't have the resources. She's been going in and out of, jail and things like that, but right now, she needs help right now. I can't tell her, just love her through it. Just get on the insurance, checklist or, on somebody's to call list. What do I tell her right now? How do we help her daughter right now so that tomorrow morning she doesn't find her, passed away in her garage? What do I tell her today?
Yeah, that's definitely a loaded question, because it's not, there's not a one answer there's a lot of people that would ask that question, and the same answer is not gonna fix the problem for every single person. I'm really sorry that she's going through that. It's a huge strain on family. It tears, it affects a lot more than just the person. I think that, you said the answer isn't just loving her. And I would somewhat disagree, but I understand what you mean. I think that the key is getting her to love herself, because I know when I was, using on a daily basis, I certainly didn't love myself, and I didn't really care if I died. It didn't really matter. I didn't really care if I got locked up. I didn't care if I died. Nothing really mattered, because I really didn't care about myself. I talked to someone before that, was really stressed, and they had a few days that they were really new into recovery, and they wanted to, go back to it. And I said, what do you want out of life? What do you want? Do you want to end up dead or in jail for the rest of your life? I mean, for me, what I wanted was, I wanted to go to those parent-teacher conferences and have kids and a house and a car and stuff. None of it is possible as a heroin addict. I could never have any of that stuff. So I don't know if that would help at all, but you know, I think that you know, seeing what, you know, having her remember hopes and dreams, because I know I lost them, and I'm glad that I have them back today.
Good evening, everybody, and again, I just want to also say thank you to everybody that's here and everybody sitting up there, whether you're in law enforcement, the two of you that are in recovery, go, and a mom, okay? I admire all of you. So, I'm Brittany's mom. My name is Melissa. When Britt brought up the out-of-state thing, that's because that's what happened to take place in July. Wasn't the first attempt. For when you had mentioned previously about there's just not facilities and things available, 3 years ago, I lost count how many ER visits we'd made. She'd sit on a gurney for 6 hours. She would go from vulnerable and crying to becoming like ready to kill me, being sick, and then we'd get sent upstairs to be told no, they didn't have room for her. One time we went from St. Peter's to St. Mary's, where the director actually came out to the nurse who was taking her vitals. She was very blonde, she's very beautiful. She too was a straight A student and an all-star athlete. But they actually looked at me and said, we can't put her back there with them. And I said, who's them? Well, we have a lot of men back there detoxing. I said, do me a favor, put her back there. Because that would scare the living daylights out of me. But you know what? Hey, I went home, we brought some antidiarrheal medication, we watched a lot of movies, I detoxed her. Did it work? No, she relapsed. Then she did 4 Winds for a week and she relapsed again. For anybody that is looking for information, and I would love to talk to you afterwards, I don't even know how I came up with the information. In July, I knew she relapsed, her sister and I knew. All you can do, parents, friends, teachers, educators, don't give up. They gotta do it on their own, but don't just, I would text her daily. I would call and leave messages. Her sister and I would go back and forth. Her sister would be like, I'm so sick of this crap. Then she'd be crying. I'd be crying. But I would text and text because I'd rather she take 3 days to get back to me than to be dead. I know parents, she's lost friends who also grew up in that cookie cutter life. I found a number, I got referred one place to another in the summer when she admitted she relapsed, and that's the first she admitted to me she was shooting up. I knew she was. We were at a little fair a couple of weeks before that with my beautiful, her niece and my granddaughter, her sister's daughter, Haley, and I looked at her arms and I said, what's that, kid? And she's like, well, you know I work with kids, you know, obviously it's a bruise. Did she think I was stupid? Of course not. Am I gonna take her down in the middle of Half Moon and say, I know you're shooting up? She had to admit it to me. All I could do every night was just pray to God that that wasn't gonna be the time, just like her friends. I ended up with a place called Recovery Road. They're based out of various states. My little princess here lucked out because they sent her to West Palm Beach, Florida. So, resources? No. You just do what you gotta do. She signed a promissory note, all right? She's got $60,000 in student loans from St. Rose. She's gonna be paying them back too. But that was the education well worth it, that 28 days. There's one in Massachusetts, I guess, California. I mean, anybody who's looking for that information, because I'm sorry to say, in this state, and I've lived here all my life and I'm not bashing it, it's a wonderful, wonderful state. There is not enough resource. I sat in Conifer Park with her 3 years ago when she was in one of her therapy sessions. She just happens to have a mom who would drive her there. Was that what I expected of my daughter in college? No. Hey, but it is what it is. You take what you get. I watched a young man come in and say to the woman, I'm gonna relapse. I really need to meet with somebody. She was kind, she was empathetic, she heard him. There was nothing she could do. There was nobody available. I was ready to knock on the door and have her counselor stop talking to her because she said, I can get you in here in 2 days. What did you say earlier? 2 days, he probably didn't come back, or God forbid he died. So there are resources. Unfortunately, there ain't so much around here, but anybody looking for information, just do a Google search, Recovery Road. Amazing, amazing, amazing. 7 months clean.
I have a question for Sergeant Doug. There is something that Rodney said. He said, it was so bad that the idea of jail was inviting. Like, it was almost like a good thing. And that made me think about all the talk about how the first thing that happens with drug addicts is they're put in jail, and that really doesn't solve the problem. It happens a lot with people because of pot, etc. But then Megan pretty much sees that visit to jail as a good thing. So you who are in the law enforcement, what can you say about talks and plans on how this should be approached? Because obviously, I don't think the methods being used currently are really that effective. They're not doing what really can help drug addicts get out of it. So what are the talks? What are the things that are being planned? How are things going to change? Are they going to change?
First of all, from our side of the house, once we hook them and the judge sees them and sends them off to jail, we don't normally get back involved with them again unless we see them again back out on the street. So in some respects, knowing what they do with them in the facilities is more of a hearsay than being there and actually seeing it hands-on. But in the program that I supervise and the training that we do, we often are at jails or intake facilities to work with and do evaluations on folks that are coming in who are under the influence. I have seen facilities that within 24 hours you're looked at by the physician there. If you are going into withdrawal, they are going to prescribe meds that will help lessen those withdrawals. Other facilities have it where they'll set up where you'll end up on a methadone program or a Suboxone or one of those to help carry you over. It all depends on the facility. I've seen some facilities that just like, tough luck, you'll get over it some other time. Like they're laying on the cell and they're like, yeah, they'll get over it. Okay. But it's all going to vary, and it's going to vary on how much money they have and how much manpower they have and how much training they have for their staff. There's huge, huge differences, not just in this state, but across the country as well when you visit these different facilities. So I can't say specifically, but I can tell you some do nothing, some do counseling, and they have in the facility almost like an AA kind of association to help it once they've gotten you through the withdrawal side of it. And others where methadone or Suboxone are major pieces that they would prescribe.
Thank you.
Man in the blue.
Hi. Have there been any efforts to increase the amount of rehab programs in prisons or make the painkillers that are giving people addictions harder to get for minors?
I'm going to ask you guys a question, and no one has to put up their hand and answer. You just think about this. And it's more dealing with the availability of those pills. How many people here have had surgery, some sort of a surgery where you've been prescribed the pain pill? Number one. You have to put up your hands, okay? I'm not going to know. I don't guys going to throw themselves under the bus on this one. How many of you finished that script up completely? Those of you who didn't finish up the script, how many of you turned them into a facility for destruction? Or how many of you folks said, I paid $20 copay and by gosh, I'm going to keep those pills because I might need them someplace. Now, if that's where you went with this, I'm going to ask you the next question. How many pills are in the vial? Were there 11 pills? Were there 9 pills? Were there 13 pills? How do you know? Because friends of your children come over, they get inquisitive, and hopefully they're not in the medicine cabinet, please no. But they're there, people are taking 1 or 2, and all of a sudden you may have a reason you want to go use it. Shoot, there's only 4 pills left. I could have sworn I had more pills there. You probably did. So that area of diversion is huge for a way to get it out. We bang on the physicians, and there's some physicians in the room, and I was dealing with some hospital docs, and we were talking about how can you write the script that you write, the amount you write. And they brought up a very interesting point, and I hadn't thought about this till we had the discussion. They said, we're part of a corporation. We're hired, this hospital's a corporation. When patients come in, they fill out quality of service slips. So if I'm not meeting their needs for pain management, I get a bad tick. Eventually down the road, I have to worry about being rehired by this facility because I'm not meeting the needs or what the facility feels I should be doing. So as much as we hold the feet to the physicians, and I've had some discussions with some that I just had to walk out of the room almost, But others are honest, and yeah, we know that. We're well aware of that. We're doing the bare bones minimum, but we're also walking that thin line where we are concerned about being able to retain our availability for this medical facility that we're associated with. So that's another aspect that we don't think about.
Ma'am in the back, black sweater.
Hi, thank you. My name is Judy Moffett. I'm a teacher in South Winsfeld High School. I'm also a member of many coalitions that deal with pretty much every aspect of the issue that we have in our communities. I'm also the mother of a son who struggled with drug addiction. And a couple of things I want to say. This is a family disease. If the families don't get healthy, our loved ones stand almost nil chance of getting healthy. So the thing I want to say to family members is, not only do you have to look for this, but when you find it, you have to get healthy. So I'm a big proponent of Nar-Anon. My friends and I are part of Nar-Anon. 5 years ago when I found the help, I would drive 100 miles every Tuesday so that I could get the help. It's imperative that we get help because it's like putting the oxygen mask on. If you put the oxygen mask on, then you can help your loved ones. So that is imperative. It's not selfish. It's imperative. So anywhere I go, I pass them out to the police. I pass them out to parole officers. Tell these people that you're dealing with their children, they need to get healthy. Because if they get healthy, their loved ones can get healthy. That's one of the things I want to say. I'm very, very passionate about that. The other thing is there are no treatment. I have calls every day. I am, and my friends, we're like one women, one man facilitators. I get calls from all over the state. Can you help me? Because they start hearing they are desperate. We deserve more in this state. So one of the things that we have to do is we have to be advocates. You have to let your voice be heard. I was at Advocacy Day. Many of the people in this room are at Advocacy Day. No more. I was down in Washington, D.C. At the rallies. No more deaths. It's not acceptable. So they're not going to change because we want them to, and you have to get yourself educated. We know more than most people know because they only know one piece of it. When you're a desperate mother and you see your kid hooked up to in the ICU because he detoxed on the floor of a jail cell, and I had to call every day and say, it's not just heroin, it's Xanax too, and he can die from that, and guess what, he almost did. That's not okay. It's not okay. And having my son go to prison because of a disease is not okay. But you know what, for me, I'm glad he did. It did save his life. So family members, you need to get help from people who understand this. Other people don't understand it like we understand it. So come into the rooms of Nar-Anon, find support groups of people that understand this, and get yourself educated because it is the lives of our children. And I'm not going to stand by. My son is doing remarkably well now, but now it's my turn to help out and reach out to other people. There is help, and it's going to take a whole village. It's not just the law enforcement. There are other ways to think about this. So get in your I work with DAs, I work with judges, I work with a lot of people because they need to hear our stories. We're only seeing one side of it. We have to see all sides. So please join coalitions, form coalitions, do whatever it takes. March on Albany, march Washington, D.C. That's what it's going to take.
Okay, we're going to take one more question. Okay, yeah.
Congratulations again, Rodney. My question is from the time you started using, how long before it became a daily that it was you had to have it every day?
I know that for me, it was probably a matter of 2 or 3 months from when I had first been prescribed the prescription pain medications to when I actually made the connection. I mean, I was taking them every day, taking them as prescribed because of my injuries and things, but yeah, probably about 2 to 3 months before I actually realized that I was dependent on them and started to truly make the connection and start abusing them, and then every day from then on until I finally got sober 4 years ago. So.
I think that for me, I was doing other stuff too, but once I started, even with other stuff, I had to have something, it had to be something. If it wasn't gonna be heroin or cocaine or marijuana, then at least I could get booze, you know? But eventually, you know, it doesn't matter when you're addicted. After a few months of doing it, you can drink all the booze you want and you're still gonna be sick, because that's not craving the addiction. Would it be all right just to touch on my own topic for 1 second here? Since you said the last question, I just wanted to say one thing though beforehand. You know, I think that the jails and stuff like that, that's you know, that's an excellent place for someone to detox and get them away from the drug. But if they don't figure out what turned them to the drug or work on themselves, then they're gonna go back to it. And I've seen people, you know, and you have too, we've seen 2 dear friends of ours complete a program and put some time away from the drug, and they overdosed and they're not with us anymore. And one of the things that you know, upsets me the most is you know, nowadays you can get the help if you want it, because if you go into a hospital and tell them you're gonna kill yourself, they cannot turn you away, you know, and then just drop it on them that you're also a heroin addict. You know? So you can get that help, but you take a person that's you know, pushed away their family and friends and has no one, and they're by themselves, and you put them into, you know, a program and you give them the 28 days, and now they start to feel a little bit better about themselves. And then they get out. Well, where do they go? They don't have a home. They lost everything. They've got nowhere to go. They don't have a job or any place to stay. And where are the programs to help them get them back on their feet? Where are those aftercare programs? You know, these people, like, you know, like I went through a 28-day program and then a 6-month halfway house. You know what happens after 6 months? Good luck. You know, I didn't have, you know, a job and house waiting for me, you know. Luckily, in those 6 months, I was able to rebuild some family ties and friendships, and you know, and I struggled for a while, but I almost gave up after, you know, 6, 7 months, after a year even, because I was all alone and there was no programs there to help me, you know. So I'd really love to see some programs out there to just help someone through that first initial thing when they reintroduce themselves to society. I mean, the programs, let's face it, insurance is horrible. I mean, let's face it. I mean, across the board, not just for recovery purposes, it's bad, you know. And not everyone's gonna vote for Bernie Sanders to make it better, you know. But, you know, I think that, you know, I think there needs to be a little bit more attention to the people that are really trying, you know, and they put some distance there, because, you know, it broke my heart to see these couple of friends of ours that put, you know, one person graduated from drug court, and it was, what, 2 days after he graduated from drug court that he overdosed, and he was sober for, what, 2 years, you know? It was almost to the day. But thank you all for having me, and that's it.
So as we wrap up our Q&A, the community agencies that are here joining us, is there anything that you all want to add in response to any of these questions tonight?
So I wanted to just touch on a couple of things. First of all, County Mental Health Center, as far as treatment in the jail. Just this past October, we were able to add not a full-time person, but in addition to the psychiatrist who we have there 5 mornings a week, a community mental health nurse that we've got there 3 mornings a week, a social worker who's also a CAPteens, certified alcohol substance abuse counselor, is now there. We're going to be adding a part-time outreach worker. That person is going to help link someone upon reentry to the community after they're released from the jail. Now, the advantage of this is that we've got a person inside the jail. That person also spends time in our clinic. They'll be able to follow that person as they leave jail and come back into the community. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we collaborated with the Prevention Council in Saratoga County on a grant. Hopefully we'll find out fairly soon, in the the next maybe 2 months or so is what I heard most recently. Hi, Janine. About the Recovery Community Center, and I'm maybe let Janine talk more about that, but it's an opportunity. Now, this is not treatment, but one of the things that's really missing is how you help people make the transition from one state to another state. And the state is up here, and it's in here, and it's where you're physically located, how you reorient and reintegrate somebody back into the community. There are going to be some treatment options available. County Mental Health Center also has an alcohol substance abuse treatment program, but the Recovery Community Center is going to involve peers and navigators, and it's not treatment. It is specifically not treatment. It's an opportunity to have a place for people to go. So we talked about people, places, and things. These are people who have been through it and are trying to stay out of it in a place that's not going to expose them to the same kind of things that they've been exposed to previously. So with any luck, that'll be turned over, I think, within probably the next 6 weeks. So there are some things going on.
Hi, I'm Janice Pritchard from Whitney Young Health. I just wanted to tell the community members here that there is the OASIS website. The Office of Alcoholism and Substance Abuse Services has a website with resources throughout the state for treatment facilities. At Whitney Young Health, we provide methadone maintenance treatment and addictions outpatient services. But there's a variety of services, and I also want to direct you to the Combat Heroin part of that website. If you go there, they have all kinds of material information, how to have a conversation with your kid about drugs, about and how to communicate what to look for, how to safely store your prescription medications, how do you dispose of them. There's a lot of really good, helpful information for families at that website. So wanted to mention that. Some of the material is out at our table related to that website. Thanks.
Excuse me, I'll say something as well.
I just want to make one final comment. I'm just a mom in the community, but I'm hearing lots of people talking about gaps where they're not getting the kind of help that they need. In addition to advocating for the people who you know are affected by this, please take a moment to advocate for the people who have the ability to make a change. Please make sure your legislator knows about the gaps. Please, as you launch a new program for this transition period, share the success with the legislator so they can fund OASIS and get those programs out there more. This is my first education about opiates and the impact it has on the community and on people who are your neighbors and your friends and sometimes even your family members. This is my first education. I don't know how well educated the people who control the money are. So you have more knowledge than anybody else. Make sure they know.
Thank you. My name's Shenendehowa High. I'm the director of the Prevention Council. Dr. Prezioso mentioned a few minutes ago that we had collaborated along with a couple of folks in recovery and some other administrators with the county, put together a proposal to have a recovery community organization that would serve Saratoga County. And the way we describe it is in recognizing that addiction is a disease, and much like other chronic diseases, you can relapse, you may have reoccurring problems, and as much as someone has a cancer diagnosis, they get treatment, they have surgery, it may reoccur. We have a whole lot of compassion for that person, we have a lot of resources. What we hope a community resource center will do for addiction, or recovery center will do, is it will function much like the American Cancer Society or the American Lung or Juvenile Diabetes Association. It's a place where you can go for resources, you can go for help, for family members to get information. It'll complement whatever your doctor recommends that you do, but it'll be a space for you to get more information and to have it recognized without stigma that it's a disease, that you may have a relapse, that you come back for treatment, come back for assistance, and we're hoping this center will be funded, as Dr. Prezioso said, we'll find out probably within the next month. And if we don't get funding, we're at least going to start implementing pieces of it, because clearly there's very strong interest and certainly a demand for services. Just a couple of other things. When you leave, and we have our information table outside, our agency is working with every town across Saratoga County, probably not every town, probably about 15 towns, to provide Narcan training. People mentioned if someone overdoses before, especially in the more rural areas, before a paramedic or emergency services can get to them, there is a treatment called Narcan that people can be trained and can have on them, especially if you have a relationship, a loved one who's addicted to an opiate. Being able to have Narcan on you and administer it, it actually reverses it for a very short time, but it reverses the drug. It's like a miracle drug that reverses the opioid and its impact chemically on the brain, and then you have to get them into treatment and to a hospital, etc. But we're running those trainings all across Saratoga County. We have a schedule outside, just outside the lobby here. So we'll be offering those. They're free. They're in collaboration with Catholic Charities, which makes them available. So there certainly is a lot of need. We're trying to work with other agencies to create some solutions. We can all, as the woman just said a moment ago, advocate for better solutions, both from Albany, even from our own county government. We have a board of supervisors. Those folks need to know we have these needs in our community for these services, and we need more of them. Thank you.
First of all, we just want to thank our speakers one more time for coming together tonight. And thank you all for your questions. We'd like to invite you to go to the information tables following our program tonight if you have any other questions, and you can also call the Prevention Council, or you can call CAPtain if you have any questions following tonight and you need help. So this concludes our Q&A. At this time, we ask that the CAPteens, wherever you are in the room, come to the stage and join us. We want to thank you all for taking this journey with us tonight as we listen to powerful stories and as we came together as a community in the spirit of positive change. I leave you with a thought, and that is of hope. Hope for the future. It is inspiring that this room tonight is filled with responsible, compassionate, civic-minded young leaders who not only care about their community but are dedicated to working to better their community. They uplift and empower others through the volunteer work that they do, and tonight by coming together with our speakers and our community leaders in a community conversation, they help to make a difference. CAPteens, your voices are powerful, and we thank you for sharing them with us tonight. So from behind the scenes to the stage, we appreciate all of your contributions to Real Talk. Special thanks to our hosts, Zerez, Maymun. Let's give them a round of applause.